and welcome back to Live Reality Games. We are here talking to Stephanie and Barry tonight, two players from the 2021 Can You Survive charity event. So me and Cameron are here to interview them about their games. We are very excited about this one because we've just heard a lot from all the other interviews about these two. So now we're going to finally get the game from their perspective. Yeah, welcome, Barry and Steph.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon and Cameron.
My brother's name is Cameron, so it's still so weird when everyone says Brandon and Cameron.
You mean your parents aren't adopting me?
No. So you two are actually the furthest travelers to our event. So that's the first fun fact about you two. So since you had to travel so far, what made you both apply in the first place and travel literally across the country for this?
Sure.
Steph.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I actually, I heard about Can You Survive from a friend who actually sent a notification in our group. And I remember first seeing it and saying, oh my gosh, like, who's going to go there to play this game in real life? Because I was so new to Survivor and online games and all that stuff. Then I remember it being like really late at night, and I literally woke up and had a random thought, and I'm like, those are my best thinking is done at night. So I literally go ahead and I go into the chat like 2 months later, and I find Can You Survive? And I said, I'm going to give this a shot because I have nothing else to do, and I think I really want to do this. And I went ahead and I contacted this Can You Survive, the group, and I was chatting with someone, and I had no idea who this person was, and they said, nope, sorry, we're full. And then a week later, someone dropped out, and I actually got the opportunity to be casted. So I was excited about that. As my first game, I was expected to play my first game right when I signed up. So more to come.
Cool. What about you, Barry?
I didn't know that about you, Steph, so I'm very glad that you were able to come in as a replacement, because I feel like this game would have been very different without you here. For me, I had heard about live games, I think through Reddit or somewhere. And then I was cast for 2 of them last year, and then the pandemic happened, and one of them just didn't get redone for this year. And then the other one I was supposed to go for again, but then they canceled it again due to the pandemic. And so I saw, I think it was Live Reality Games Facebook page. I think Brandon had posted on there that he was casting for a game. And so I applied and then interviewed with him. And I thought Brandon seemed pretty disinterested when we were interviewing. And then I was like, oh, I think I bored him. And then, and then I found out like a month or 2 later that I got offered a spot. I was like, sweet, let's do it. Let's go check out Maine. And that all fell into place.
Cool. And then
he was just playing hard to get.
Right. And then you learn after that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah. I've learned otherwise since then.
But I would say for Barry, and Barry and I have spoken, we spoke about this actually in the game. For us, it was a little different experience coming from so far away. So I am from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I had to travel to Maine. What a fun fact, and folks don't know, is that it was like amazing race for me to get to Maine. Literally the night before, my flight was canceled. I don't know what happened. American Airlines, they canceled my flight the night before, and literally at 10 o'clock, and I had to go ahead and reschedule my flight. I rescheduled my flight, got a new flight that same day that I was traveling. Then that was a connecting flight to Philadelphia, and apparently due to bad weather, we literally had to make like an emergency landing and fill up for gas because we were running out of gas in the thing. Like, it was insane, all due to bad weather. And I had to also like book 2 other flights just to get to Maine because the weather was just so terrible that day. And what folks don't know is that for us, when you're traveling from another location to go on set, like to go to play, your game literally starts, I think, when you leave your house. So for me, I had to calculate. I had to say, okay, well, it's taking me like 10 hours to get there. What am I going to eat? How long is it? When am I going to get to a place that I can eat something? Is anything going to be open? So right after, all like my amazing race experience to get there, everything was great. I had Nadina pick me up. It was amazing. It was like all good in the daytime. But what happened at night was that I didn't eat. Literally, I got a sandwich from total strangers that gave me a sandwich at 12:30 in the morning for me to eat because I did not know when I was going to eat. So for us, I would say for us traveling from far away, like we have to plan all these things out because you're going to spend a couple of days and you don't know what's going to happen. So you have to get your mind prepared. So for me, the game started like way earlier. And Barry, you were mentioning the same thing, I think, for you.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, it was, coming there was a whirlwind. I had, I just bought a place 2 months ago. And so moving in and everything is all I've been focused on. And then my parents came and visited for a week. So then I was like playing host with them here. And literally the day after they left was when I flew out for Maine. So that was and literally the day before I was like trying to find the best clothes to get for this in case of like bad weather and whatnot. And it felt very rushed at the end. But then, when I flew out, I don't even remember where my layover was, but I went to Charlotte, and then I was trying to get a good meal in, and the lines were insane everywhere. And so I got like this really janky, like airport pizza somewhere, and that was mostly it. And then I get to the airport in Maine at 12:30, and Brandon picks me up, and I didn't realize it was a 2-hour drive to the campsite. So we get there, it's like 2:30. It was buggy there. I remember that night, at least right when we got there, and it was wet. And then I just had a sleeping bag, but no sleeping pad or anything. And I could not, and I was so anxious about the game too. I was like, because it is different versus like if you live in Maine, you can just go home if you get voted out early. Where with me, I was like, well, I have a flight in like 5 days or whatever. So I was coming up with backup plans in case I got voted out. I had like a list of activities to do on my phone to keep myself busy over the next few days if I was going to be out early. Like it was just a very different experience. And then,
So do you think, I mean, that's an interesting point that you make, that like it is a different experience where, the people like you, where you have flights booked and you can't just drive home or something like that. Not that anyone here was like giving up or like happy to leave the game, but do you feel like there was like a little bit of like an extra motivation to play a little bit harder, knowing that, hey, I'm stuck out here, I put all this time and effort? Like, did you feel that? Was that like something that you guys felt?
A little bit, not a ton personally for me. I was like, I wanted to do well. I just had no idea what to expect. I'd never done one of these before or any sort of org game before. So I went in optimistic that I would do well, but I was always like preparing. I was like, you know what? If I get there and I get voted out early, I want to still have it be a good experience going and visiting Maine and have it be a good trip. So that was like kind of my worst case scenario thinking, I think.
I knew I wasn't going home until literally on Sunday. I said, I'm going to stay in this game as long as possible because I am going to have the full experience. So I tried to make sure. I was like, nope, I'm going to do everything I can. So it did impact my game, I would say, because for me, I felt that, hey, I came all the way out here. Like I have to, put in the work because I don't want to, like, it's that in my head, because I just wanted to make sure that I got the full experience. So the longer I stood, I remember me counting the days saying, okay, 3 more days left, 2 more days left. Yes, perfect. My flight is this. I was like, wait, am I going to be able to get a lobster roll? Because if I stay, so yeah, that's another story. But because I was there, I was there for the full time. So for me, it was like, I might not get a lobster roll. This might not work.
Now, Steph, you kind of had to play way before you started because of another game that you played.
Oh, yeah.
And you hear about this bomb.
A bomb. It was a bomb.
During that game about this game. So how did you react to hearing about what you heard about Katie and Alan? during Survival Challenge?
So I was playing another game, which actually, like I said, Can You Survive was supposed to be my first game. It just so happened that in that game I was already traveling to that location, and they needed a female player. And I said, you know what, I'm already there. Like I'm already going there. Why not play? But it just turns out that while I'm in the game and I'm playing, I am speaking with one of my allies at the time, and her and I are sharing information, and she tells me, and she opens up to me, she says, oh, my husband and I are playing another game in 2 weeks. And I was like, huh? And it was Katie who's actually playing this game. She's like, I'm playing and my husband's playing. And I said, bitch, I'm playing too. And so right then and there, our jaws just dropped, and we did not know what we were like. She didn't know. I don't think at that moment when she said it, she didn't realize what impact it was going to have later on. So before the game, for me, I was extremely nervous because I said, I've met Katie. I've played with Katie. Like, okay, I played with Katie. I had this, I really think she's such a great player, and she did so well in the game, and she voted me out in the game. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be intense. Her and her husband, what am I going to do with this information? I was torn, but I knew that I had an advantage, I would say, because I had the information and there was 2 of them and 1 of me. So that I did start thinking about the game a lot earlier. Because of that, it was like a big bomb, and I knew about it. So I went into the game knowing this information. And in fact, because I played the game 2 weeks before Can You Survive, one of the challenges for me was that game is very popular. A lot of folks know it. So I felt that people are watching. They've watched this. I stand out. They're going to know that I played this game. I just didn't know what type of threat level I was going to have, like what type of target I was going to have in my back, just because I played the game. And then if they saw Katie and I together, how that was going to impact the game. And I soon found out, as soon as I checked in, right before I checked in, that actually someone did recognize me from the game.
Alex, right?
Alex. Oh, yes, of course. We can get into that. So as soon as I stepped into the game, as Barry was mentioning, I was there pre-check, because I flew in, and Gina brought me in that morning, and it was Barry, myself, Alex, John, and Ciara that were there right in the beginning. And through that, we were just introducing ourselves, and there was a moment in which Alex says, hey, I'll show you the bathroom. Here it is, over here, the porta potty, right? So, or the outhouse. And I went ahead with him, and during that, he says to me, he's like, girl, I recognize you from Survivor Challenge. You played that, right? And I'm like, yes, I did. And I was very, I felt like, oh, this is great that he's telling me this, and that he's not, kind of like saying it to other people or anything like that. So I felt very comfortable with him. In fact, like Alex at that moment was like my ride or die. For some reason, like just his presence, I was like, oh, this guy, yes. So that's a little tea about that. And you'll see later on that like I definitely thought about him all the time in the game, especially in the beginning.
I think the mindset was the same on both sides. Like he wanted to work with you the most out of everybody, no questions asked.
Immediately.
I think everyone wanted to work with Steph.
Yeah.
That's a common theme this season.
Okay, so you check in. You two actually have to sit there for the longest of the entire 2 hours. Barry, I heard that you fell asleep. You didn't sleep that night, so I guess why not sleep during check-ins?
I was the very first person to check in, and yeah, and we were just, I kept drinking water. I probably went to the bathroom like every 20 minutes, all 4 days, it felt like. But yeah, it was long. Sarah was next to me, and she was in blue, and I kept like hoping she would look over and we could just like wink or smile or something. But I was a good rule follower at that. And then pre-game too, I didn't talk with anyone. Like, well, you were in the car ride. I took a car ride with you and Alex in, and initially my plan was to not tell people that I was a fan of the show. And then he started talking, and I was like, fuck, this is not going to work because I'm not going to be able to hide this well. And so I was trying in the car, and I realized that I'm not going to be able to do this for 4 days. And but we, like, everyone in that early crew, I think, had kind of a good feel with each other. But there was zero game talk about anything, and I think there's just kind of a little bit of a comfort as being like, oh yeah, we at least exchanged pleasantries early on.
And I felt like I was a little frustrated with you, Barry, at that moment, because I felt that, like when we were coming in, people had almost like their colors, right? So there was like blue, there was pink, and some folks were green, but Barry was a blue and I was a blue, and I could tell. So I kept kind of like, is he gonna make eye contact with me? But I felt like you were just like, not trying to, like, you were being there, present, but not like, hey, and I don't know, I was just kind of like, and even Ciara at one point, because the 5 of us are there, right? So she said, I guess it's the 5 of us right now, something like that. She mentioned Ciara, and I just thought it was brilliant. I was like, oh, this girl is playing. But it seemed like people were tiptoeing a little bit, so I was like, okay, never mind. But I know, just thinking about my like right when I first met you, and I was like, yes, and I was like trying to give you a wink or two, and I just couldn't. I don't know what happened. What was going on? Why did he wink back at me?
I didn't want to. I wanted to feel people out. One of my, I guess kind of my main strategy going is I wanted to like wait for the game to come to me early on in terms of feeling out people, which we'll dive into but waiting for people to kind of feel me out or to feel them out, see how we click. Cause I didn't want to jump into like, oh, like let's work together. Let's be a final 2 and then find out that they're like crazy or can't keep their mouth shut or whatever. So,
of course.
I mean, knowing what I know now, hell yeah, I would have done that because I felt because we got along real well, and I mean, I felt like I really enjoyed playing with you, so that was a big. I would, in hindsight, yes, but
you're like, I should have went back.
No. I think that's a advice to every future LRG player is break the rules early on. Like there's no problem with that. I mean, we have to tell you don't talk to each other, but like there's literally no negatives that could happen from getting to know more people. Or even I think, and I've done this before too, Barry. I've shown up early and I kind of clammed up because I was like, oh, I don't want to like reveal anything, but it almost makes you seem more like a standoffish person. Not that, I mean, I don't think that like negatively impacted you, but I think it's just beneficial to show your personality from like the first second.
Yeah. The other thing too, that I did not realize how many connections there were and how many people like knew each other from online games and other stuff. Like I came in knowing no one, and I guess it was naive on my part, but I just assumed it was like an all newbie season, so to speak, when they have on Survivor where no one really knows anyone. And it's, so I wanted to go in and have it be kind of a like clean slate. And then obviously as the game unfolded, you like find out, and especially at the end, you realize probably the majority of the people there knew one person or knew of them at least in some respects. So that was just kind of but yeah, it's good advice, Cameron. Next game, I think it'll be a little different story if I'm in a situation like that.
I think honestly, you were one of the only ones who didn't have a connection to someone in the game / had never played before. So there were only like 6 or 7 that had never played before, and there were only a few who didn't know like at least one other person. So if you combine those two things, you were the only one that didn't have either of those things. So
So well, now I know for future ones that the community's small and there's probably going to be overlaps. And
yes.
Just speaking about that as an example for me, when we were waiting there, watching the trees, taking in the sun, I remember that I I counted 18 people and I said, oh, great, this is it. I don't see Katie and Alan. This is amazing. They got a flat tire or they didn't come. They knew I was playing. They want their game blown up. And then I saw 19 and I was like, oh God, then there's going to be 20. And I was like, okay, well, they're not 9. I see 19 here. The 19th person's here. Then it's not Katie or Alan. So I was like, oh, perfect. They still didn't come. And then they trickle in and I was like, oh no. So Barry, like, I did not want to know anyone in the game. Trust me. I did not. So that from in my mind there at that moment, I said, oh my gosh, there's Katie, there's Alan.
Yeah.
I guess this party will start.
I think it definitely was, depending on the person, it was either a blessing or a curse for them.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, because obviously with them, I don't think it was helpful with certain players in terms of how they let other players affect their games based on pre-existing relationships. I think hurt them, but yeah, it's a little, yeah. So we'll see how it goes in the future, but I liked going in just not knowing anyone and having kind of a clean slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot more fun to go in and not know anybody. Like when I played Surviving Maine, I expected to know people and I didn't know anyone, so it was great. I couldn't imagine playing and like knowing people. That'd be stressful.
Yeah.
So going into the actual game, we finally let you talk. You both start on the blue tribe. What were your first impressions of your tribe? Who did you click with right from the get-go? Steph, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So immediately when we had an opportunity to get to know each other, my first person that I said was like, oh, I want to get to know Barry because I just spoke to Barry, or at least he was like the first person that I saw. So that in my mind, that was it. I thought that, we had a good conversation, we were all talking to everyone, but for me, it was like, okay, Barry. Then I noticed Justin right away. I noticed Justin right away because I noticed that he played Survivor Maine. So I said, oh my gosh, I want to link up with Justin. I remember him from the game. And I don't know, like, I just wanted to link up with him. And I did notice that Justin, what I observed was that he was just taking it in. He was listening and he was doing a lot more listening than talking. And I knew that he came off like a little nervous, but that's what I realized in the beginning for me. Also, there was Liz, very energetic, more seasoned woman. She spoke a lot, very enthusiastic, and she just, said, I know this person, I know that person. It was just wildfire for sure. And also Sarah as well. Like, I did not know that she was actually in that moment. I didn't know that she played in Survivor Maine. So to me, she was just this energetic, just vibrant woman. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you just came straight out of a Herbal Essence commercial because her hair was flowing. And that I don't know how someone's hair could just flow. So it was amazing. And I was like, I just know you smell good too. Yeah. So then we had Alby, great first vibes, but I still was more drawn to Barry and Justin right in the beginning. Like him and I made a little connection, but and then John, because I also knew John from previously. Like I also met him like right before with Barry. So am I missing someone? I feel like Jackie. I immediately I saw Jackie. She was a little bit reserved, and I don't know. It was just like my first vibes of the tribe right there. First impression. That's pretty much what I saw. If I'm missing someone, I'm sorry.
I think you got everybody. Barry, what about you?
A lot of that's actually pretty similar. Right off the bat, right in the beginning, I felt probably the quickest bond with, I'd say, Sarah, in that she really reminds me a lot of one of my best friends here, just kind of this like zany, fun, energetic personality. And we just clicked right off the bat. And then Steph and John, I felt like just good with them. Like they were both cool. We had a little bit of conversation. I just felt there was almost like this unspoken like commonality there. And I didn't feel like, at least for me, I didn't feel like I needed to try too hard or be like, I just felt more comfortable right off the bat. Alby, in the beginning, he was pretty quiet, and I felt good with him, but I didn't feel like as much of a connection off the bat. Liz was great right off the bat. She was like, I mean, she was just Liz from the get-go, and like right off the bat, it was kind of like, all right, well, I was like, we have our easy first boot. And then sure enough, like her first comment in our conversation, she made some like kind of inappropriate comment. It wasn't like that bad, but it was like not the most PC at the same time. And then
when the tea comes out, you just
yeah. I mean, in her defense, like I think for me, a lot of it comes down to intent. I don't think there was any malintent behind it. I think it just was like,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I didn't have any real quarrels with it, but just the way she was chatting. And then right off the bat, she's like telling us, oh yeah, my cousin's right over there. And I was like, okay, like, and then Jackie said the same thing. Jackie, same thing. She was really nice, but she was reserved and just quieter. And then mentioned that she had like her friend right over there, which I guess was Angela. For some reason, I remember it being Crystal, but it didn't the name of the process.
I believe.
Yeah. So, but right off the bat, it was kind of, I mean, I think everyone felt that divide right off the bat in terms of if you've seen the show, you know that you shouldn't do that, and if you haven't seen the show, you don't necessarily think about that in terms of, it's not going to be an instant instinct like, oh, if they know someone over there, then like we can't really trust them, or it's going to be a way to differentiate yourself. So I think the fact that they didn't have any of that background knowledge of that just set them up in a tough spot from the get-go. But and then Justin was like, he was cool. He was quiet though in the beginning.
Very quiet.
But yeah, he seemed nice. He was intense right from the get-go. I mean, like literally right before that first challenge, he comes up to me and he's like, when I got picked, which we'll I'm sure go into, but he's like, make sure you look in the spool for an idol. And I'm like, dang, you're like on it early. And then so that was the first impressions of everyone. But I was stoked. I felt like it felt like good vibes all around.
So I don't know if we want to get into this later, but I feel like now, having talked to Sarah, John, and now you two, I'm really curious where you guys felt Alby fit into this like initial group. I mean, it obviously sounds like Liz and maybe Jackie were like obviously kind of on the outs, but with the other 6 of you, the way that you guys all listed like who I felt closest to, who, whatever, it seems very clear that Alby was not super close to anyone at that point, unless he was close to Justin. We haven't talked to Justin. So I'm curious, like, how did that change over time? Or was that more of just like and we'll probably get to that along the way, but I'm curious, like, was that a quick change, or was that just like it was a day 4 and all of a sudden he was close with everyone?
No. I wouldn't say that. There was a change, and it happened on actually the next day after the that first day was reward, right? It was the next day when things shifted a little bit, I would say. And it was, I think Alby was a little like just taking it back. Like he was just observing more. He wasn't the loudest person. He wasn't the quietest person, but he was just, just there. Not as like we had good conversations, but he just wasn't he wasn't there in the game like that he was talking to everyone and being the loudest person or he wasn't. He was very reserved. He was calm, I would say, the first time. So I think that's why he wasn't like really in that. If we were to like list them, like he was probably like the second or third person from the bottom or something like that, above like Liz and Jackie, like right that first day, to me in my head. I don't know about you, Barry, what you think.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I felt like in the first day, probably my tightest people were Sarah, Steph, and John. Mm-hmm. And then, but it wasn't like Alby was like on the outs. It was definitely a big part of it. It was very much that first day. It was just, I was like, I kind of connecting more with these people. Not that I'm not connecting with him. And then the second day, which we'll get into, that definitely changed. And I think he had worked himself up into a pretty safe spot had we gone to the third tribal. And then I noticed especially the third night, or just the third day in general, it like he kept growing and growing and growing in terms of as the game went on in that capacity.
Very under the radar in the beginning.
Yeah, but he was, yeah, I mean, even if he wasn't listed high on people's like closeness, he was never like, I wouldn't say he was ever on the chopping block at all. No one ever mentioned anything. I didn't hear anybody say anything negative about him in terms of, or like, we need to worry about him or this and that.
Things took a change, and I'm sure we'll get into that because Alby and I did become very close, and some folks don't know, so you're gonna hear about it, and I'm sure in a second when we get to like, you know, a little bit later on after the reward challenge.
Yeah, you two were like a pair.
We
From our perspective, it seemed like
we sure were. So close. I mean, I can comment on that. So what I would say is that right after we had our reward challenge, I think this was still a reward challenge, right? The one where you open like the little box and you get the clue, or what a clue.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. That was the reward day. So right during that challenge, Alby goes ahead and he gets the reward. And I recall immediately, like, he goes to me, he's like, girl, I got a clue to this, and this is where it is. We got to keep this to ourselves. Why? Because we were noticing that during the day, there were a lot of conversations going on. And they were pretty much John and Barry. Like, I felt like John and Barry, like, you guys were, to me, you were a duo through the entire game. Like, you were just a duo, you know, in the beginning. And we saw that, you know, there were a lot of conversations going on with Justin and Barry and John, and Justin was speaking to everyone, but we kind of felt like, folks are speaking, and I was speaking to Alby, but they would go away and they would leave us. Like, Alby and I were left by ourselves a few times. Sarah was always in the mix. So that's how Alby and I actually became very close right before that. Like, we were just left by ourselves a few times and we were able to connect. And I wanted to make sure that I connected with him, with everyone pretty much. But him and I were left alone just a few times. And I remember us keep going to each other and say, hey, we're on the same page, right? You see that, or you see this. And that's how that relationship kind of blossomed. And it was because of that. He told me about his clue to the idol before anyone knew about the idol, the clue of where the idol was going to be, or before Sarah told. So I would say that's how our relationship blossomed. It was from there, and there I knew, I was like, okay, he trusts me enough and we can speak a little bit more about that, because he told me of what to do to actually get the idol, which I did not want to do it, but we'll speak about it.
So we talked about Barry and John kind of being a pair. We talked about Steph and Alby being a pair.
Yep.
Now, were either of you ever worried about the Justin-Sarah pair?
I wasn't really, because like, I felt really good with Sarah, and then Justin was pulling me aside all the time. Like, I feel like my relationship with Justin is probably the most, for me personally, it was probably the most unique relationship in the game. Because so right off the bat, when we were still in the field, Sarah and I went to get water, and I just told her, because we were chatting, I was like, I'm vibing with you, or like, I feel like this is a good fit, like, let's work together or something to that extent. And she was on board with it. And then she said, she's like, oh, do you recognize anyone from Surviving, or have you seen Surviving Maine? And I was like, oh yeah, I've seen, like, I saw the first episode or two. And then she's like, oh, do you recognize anyone? And I was like, I think Justin was on it, and I think he was targeting people who know the game well. And so then she was like, we'll chat later or something. And then she comes up to me and she says, and she's like, yeah, so I was on the show and Justin was too. And I told him that what you said about recognizing him. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, right off the bat, like, Justin's not going to trust me, because I literally, and this is where I was like, seriously, is this how this is starting out, where I picked the one random person? I like was kicking myself for not at least like reviewing the cast or whatever before going into the game, because that was just a pretty bad snafu right up front. But then Justin right afterwards came up to me and talked to me and said, and I mean, he handled it really well. He was like, yeah, I was in Surviving Maine. We're like, I'm trying to play a pretty straightforward whatever game. I want to work with. He didn't even say I want to work with you, but he was just like, we kept talking. And I felt like he was good with me, but at the same time, I was like, if I was him, I would not fully trust me at all, just based on getting that secondhand information right off the bat. So, but Justin kept talking with me, so I felt good. I honestly have no idea where I stood on like his totem pole early on in the game, but we talked. I mean, he pulled me and John aside, and we talked about having like us three as a thing, and then he pulled me and Alby aside too, and it was us three, and then it all. But there were so many little conversations going on, but it all ultimately, it was like you could tell there was kind of the six of us, and then there were the other two on the outs, and then of the six, I mean, there were some little. Like Steph had verbalized how she was nervous about John. And I think Justin mentioned that too, about being worried that he might have an idol. And then I think John, I don't know if it was John or whoever mentioned being nervous about Justin and Sarah, but I wasn't nervous about Justin and Sarah that early on. I felt good. And Justin too was always talking about how we needed to like take out Sarah eventually, and was very adamant about that in terms of not wanting to go deep with her. So I felt like there was a lot of little, like everything was pretty chill, honestly, but there was a lot of little nerves and stuff going around. And I don't think any of it was coming back to me. I felt like everyone felt pretty good with me, at least from what I could tell. So I was like, all right, I feel pretty good. And then, and I felt like Alby was in a kind of similar spot, in that no one was really nervous about him at all, or like no one was saying anything. And same with Steph. And so I always felt like thinking about, of the six, if we had gone to another tribal, I think from my vantage point, us three would have been the decision makers on that, because I felt like everyone was kind of feeding into us, and then, but no one was coming to us. And Alby I will say Alby was very smart, because he worked the idol thing perfectly, because he told Steph first, and then he told me after he had found it. And he told me that Steph knew about it too. And then he said no one else knew about it, but he said it's only good till 12. Because at first when he told me about it, I was like, why would you tell someone you have an idol? But if it's only good till 12, like he just completely leveraged it to gain allies with him. And so after that, I was like, well, no matter what happens, I'm going to stick with him at least through this. Because if we get swapped or whatever, like here's someone on my side, or someone, it's just good to have that knowledge and information in the game. So yeah, so I felt that was like a big turning point for Alby with me in terms of like just really trusting him.
Yeah, but I would say in regards to Justin and Sarah, like I automatically, right when we got back to camp, I put them as a pair, like immediately, because even though they were trying not to be next to each other, I kind of saw her kind of going to him just a few times, and then it came out that obviously surviving Maine. So I felt that, okay, they must know each other. There's something going on here. But I wasn't very concerned about it, because actually what folks don't know is that Justin was my first ally in the game. So immediately that first challenge that we had, where we had the water challenge, I think that was the first challenge, if I'm not mistaken. And Justin and I were partnered together. And I said, I have to speak to him, because immediately when we were running back with water, I stopped and I said to him, I seen you play. I want to work with you. I got you. Like, just like straight up like that. And he's like, I got you too. We got this. So from that moment, like in the game, like the first couple of hours, Justin and I immediately were working together. It was very little words between us, but I wanted to work with him. And then there were some certain points that I was like, I'm a little sketched out by you. And he was by me too later on in the game, but we were still working together, and we with very little words. It's a very interesting relationship. You'll see. So yeah, I wasn't concerned about Sarah. I felt that, especially in like Sarah was a little bit like she moved a lot. She was just like John, like, they move a lot, they talk a lot, they're looking for idols everywhere. So to me, I felt that Justin was a little opposite of that in the game, and I knew that he didn't make it as far as he would have liked to in the previous game. So I knew that he wanted to play a different game. So I wasn't that worried about that. That was just in my head. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is there anything challenge-wise you want to discuss about the reward challenges on day 1 before we move to day 2?
You gave us a bad hatchet.
Yes.
Oh, the hatchet part of it.
I'll
The
take the fall.
hatchet.
I'll take the fall.
No,
Brandon
I
asked
mean,
me to bring a hatchet. I brought a hatchet. I didn't know what it was going to be used for. It wasn't as good as the other ones. I'll take the fall for that one.
well, okay, so I've
Blue tribe
explained
was
this.
I handled the blue tribe, so I feel like you guys can forgive me.
So this was a pond situation. With the challenge was supposed to originally be in the pond. And so it was one of the challenges we had to change right before the game started. So originally it was the 3 hatchets sitting in the pond that you had to go out and retrieve and then bring back. So you could grab whichever hatchet you wanted to. So it didn't matter if they were different. But ultimately that didn't happen. So you ended up with the bad hatchet, which I didn't know it was a bad hatchet when I looked at it because I've never used a hatchet before. So
well, didn't Rebecca's son like take Justin's wood and just like whoosh right afterwards?
Yeah,
he used
the
a
other
different
one
hatchet.
definitely was better. That said, I mean,
I thought Justin was going to chop off his finger.
I was more worried about the fingers during that challenge. I will say that I was very worried about it the next morning, and so I was very aware of where you guys stood in the blindfolding challenge. And unless the win would have given you a lot more morale, you guys were like 6 pieces behind. So I don't think it really made a difference. But
I will say quick, that first challenge when Liz called me out and had me do that puzzle or the logic puzzle. So I was like going into it. I learned from this event, there's some puzzles I'm very good at and there's some I'm very bad at. Reading those logic puzzles under pressure is not my forte. And so right off the bat, I'm up there and we're all at the same spot. And then Ciara literally finished that in like 10 seconds. Like it was insane. And then they do it on the show. So I just glance over and see where like 2 rows are and then line them up and then figure out the last one. So that's why we got the decent camp. Otherwise I was like, I don't think we would have won.
Otherwise, it would have been blue camp at the pink camp, and
it's a lot of walking for you guys.
Yeah,
right. And I would say another something to point out that I think it's going to lead into I'm sure our next conversation is that during those first like reward challenges, I was very like I knew that at that time Liz had immunity because she had raised the most money in our tribe, right? So she was immune for the first one. So I was definitely having conversations with Liz, trying to speak to her and make sure that I was in her good side because she's the only person that's immune at tribal, right? And it turns out that came to fruition because actually I remember that during that challenge where we had to chop the wood to make the fire or whatnot, Liz actually peeped over to me and she goes, "Do it with me and Justin, do it with," and I had no idea why she wanted me to be with her and Justin to do this. And I was like, is this for an idol? Is this for something? I don't know what it was, but like Liz, she took care of me, y'all. Like you don't know that, but like she really confided in me. And in fact, we'll get to it later, but like she really trusted me. And to this day, like she told me, don't tell anyone. And I still haven't told anyone until today, which I will tell people what I knew.
I feel like I could see that relationship blossoming, and I mentioned it during Sarah's interview, but that challenge where the 3 of you were stacking the blocks, and it was like Sarah and Liz, and then Steph was just there as like the peacekeeper, and I could see just like you playing that game of, hey, I need to be nice to everyone here,
Right.
and it was helpful to have probably Liz, vouch for you at a certain point, just making sure no one was your enemy.
Right, absolutely. And that was the plan during that time. So I was Liz did a really nice job. I mean, her and I we connected. It was weird, total opposites, but we connected.
Yeah. I loved meeting Liz. She kept us so entertained that first day, just like
great person.
Yeah, her and her drama with Sarah was like one of the best things about the whole weekend.
It was I mean, it was the conversation of our camp, like not in a negative way, but it was just all of the moments the good moments we had with Liz, and she bestowed a lot of knowledge onto us. I would say, like for me, like there were certain things that I didn't know about camping, and she taught us that, and there's things that Sarah already knew about camping, and Liz was still teaching her about it. So it was very entertaining to watch. I would say, like, I would definitely wish it was recorded because it was so entertaining.
It was a lot of like little comments here and there that were just like a lot of little snide comments that were like both ways that were fun. But
right.
I'm sure neither of them loved it, but it was really fun. Just, yeah, I loved being on Blue Camp. We had 8 fun people to be with, and it was a good time.
Right. We made our camp that day. Everything was nice. It was very kumbaya. I would say we did a great job with that. We found the raspberries. Jackie taught me how to pick raspberries. I had a great conversation with Jackie. I think that's when we started really getting to know each other. And I think that's actually when I started noticing John. Right. So I started noticing that John would always go off to the woods. He was going off picking raspberries. He was very and he would ask people, hey, do you want to come with me or whatnot? And I just noticed that I was not going with John picking wood. Like John was, it was assumed that either he was looking for an idol, right? Or, he was having game talk with folks. But I just didn't feel like I was included in that. And I felt on the outs really because Barry, as you mentioned, like you and John we're talking. John and Justin were speaking. So it's like everyone was speaking to each other, especially the guys, but the girl, I remember the women, we were back at camp. And it was just a little frustrating. And I thought to myself, I said, maybe we should do a girls thing or something like that. I even thought about it for a moment, but then I said, we probably can't do that based on what we later found out that, when we were trying to get to know Jackie and getting to know Liz, we found that Jackie was a little reserved. Like she would speak and she would talk, but she wasn't talking game. And I recall that even that day that we went back to camp, Liz whispered to Jackie, I believe. She told Jackie told me that she told her, oh, you should look for an idol. So it did come out that apparently our target was for that first tribe where we were to go was Jackie. Because Liz gave her the heads up. I don't know if Justin told Liz. I don't know how Liz found this out, but apparently that's what Jackie told me. And I then, took that information and I said, well, this is interesting because now Liz, a person that I do want to work with, is telling someone, hey, you better look for an idol. But it seems like she's not very in tune with the game or how to play the game. So it was just, I don't know, from Liz's perspective, from my perspective, I felt like there was, I couldn't fully trust Liz because it was like, yes, you just told Jackie this, you're not speaking to me about it. And I don't know, I just felt a little odd that I don't know who told her that Jackie was going to be our first vote. Maybe Barry, you can comment on that because I have no idea. No. But I know it wasn't me. And I remember when you guys were speaking, I remember when the guys were speaking and you were coming back, I immediately went to you all and I said, because we identified that Jackie was going to be the first vote. Because really she wasn't talking game. And the way that it goes in Survivor and these games, it's like, if you're not talking game with me, then you're talking game with someone else. But it seems like you're not talking game with anyone else. Therefore, you kind of, lose out. And I kind of said to them, I was like, hey, I just heard this information that apparently, she knows that she found out that she's going to be the vote and she's looking for an idol. That's one. And also that someone told her this and she told me that it was Liz. So one of you must have told her that she was going to be the vote. Stop talking to Liz about gameplay because clearly it's going to be out in the open. That's what I felt at the time.
No, it wasn't me. I'm not sure who it was, but I will say, talking with John, we did go off a decent amount, but and I've talked with John about this. I could not get a read on him if he, we would chat and we didn't really talk any game in the beginning. It was very kind of like when Justin came over, it was like ABC, this, that. But then when it was just me and John, it was like I was hoping it was going to be more like let's work together. I got you, you got me. Let's figure this out and go far. But it felt like, I don't know, it didn't feel super tight. Whereas like when I talked with Steph or when I talked with Alby, for example, it was just like, or even with Sarah too. It was like, it's like if you hear my name, let me know. If I hear your name, let's work together. Like I like this chemistry we have going, and I just couldn't get that exact feel from John. And that's like, and I was trying to get that, but then, and I found out after that, I guess he felt that with me, but I didn't. And yeah, it's just, it wasn't verbalized to me in, I guess, a way that I understood. And I think on the flip side, like with Steph, because Steph was my number one for most of the game. And like, I guess you didn't feel that for me because I didn't verbalize that enough to you. So that's like,
I thought of, and I was thinking about this during the game, and I said, perception is reality. I see Barry and John together. They're a duo. I thought, like, I got to get rid of John. In my head, I thought, like, John has Barry. I want Barry, And then I thought to myself, okay, then Justin is with them too. What's going on? Then I see Sarah is in there. Sarah, and like, I don't know what's going on, but I want to be in it and I'm not in it. But what I would say is this, for anyone who's playing, it's kind of like, your love language, right? Some people like words of affirmation. So let's say, hey, I want to work with you. Let's work together. Some people love receiving gifts, meaning, hey, I have information for you. I have some tea for you. I know where this is. Everyone has different love languages. And I felt that my love language was making sure that I had words of affirmation. So at time in the game, I got the person who I got it was from Alby. It was like he was meeting those needs. And I really wanted that from Barry. I wanted that from you, Barry. I wanted that from other folks. But the people who were giving it to me, it turns out it was Alby, it was Justin. And I think and that actually helped me, and that's what made me like be loyal to them as much as I could.
Yeah, I think that is all-time good Survivor advice, and I've never heard it put that way, Stephanie, of just like, yeah, a lot of Survivors giving other people what they want, and like thinking about it in the way of love language and kind of providing that sort of thing is like, that's just, I don't know, an all-time analogy that I haven't heard before. So I think anyone listening should file that one away for next time.
Right. Now, Steph, you mentioned somewhat wanting to work with Liz. So Jackie was the Clearverse vote for your tribe. She went almost unanimously. Liz. Okay, so actually, this was a follow-up question that I thought of was, if Liz knew Jackie was going, why do we think she still voted for Sarah in that first tribal?
We told her it was going to be Sarah.
Okay.
We pulled all 6 of us in. At some point when Sarah was like getting water or something, we said to Jackie and Liz, we're just like, so we're voting Sarah, and yeah, and they were good. And Sarah took it well. I mean, I feel like no one ever wants to be the decoy vote, and she was cool with it. She trusted us, and I mean, it made obvious sense just based on like the premise of everything and how the tribe was. But still, though, I was like, and Sarah, I heard in her interview, she was like faking being nervous. She seemed terrified when she was next to me, and I think about my hand.
I thought she was terrified at tribal. She played me very well, so I don't know. I don't know exactly what the truth is. It could be great acting, but yeah, I mean,
I would definitely preface by saying that vote, if I'm not mistaken, it was right after Sarah went to exile.
Yes, she was at exile the night before. You guys came back and had to vote at the first challenge.
Paint the picture, right? Sarah is at exile. Everyone's trying to find out what's going on. Where did Sarah go? And the next day, literally, I think people go off picking berries, gathering 2 pieces of wood. And Liz and I are there. Again, I don't know why I'm like I'm not going with these, I'm not going with people. I'm like, I want to talk to people too. But I'm there with Liz, and Liz turns to me and she goes, I sent Sarah to exile. And literally tears coming down a little bit. So I was like, oh my gosh. But I would tell you this, Liz did not want to send Sarah to exile. Liz only sent Sarah to exile because she thought that she was the person that would have been most equipped to be there by herself. She felt very terrible about it. And I think when Sarah got back, it was kind of like, I think I know who to exile. And I was like, Liz promised me not to tell anyone. I didn't even bother to say the information that I knew, but I did know that she was sent to exile. Sorry.
Actually, I have a question quick for Steph. In terms of, if we had lost that challenge with that Waylon barely missed those things a couple times, like, who do you think would have gone home? Who would have you tried to, out of the six of us?
Out of the six of us.
Yeah.
So we jump ahead, I guess. So we skip the Liz vote out, and then you guys won 4 in a row. So assuming you lose,
That's okay.
No, I'm just trying to set the scene for people listening. So you guys voted Jackie out, you voted Liz out, then you guys won 4 straight immunities that second day. But say you lose one of those towards the end of the day, Stephanie, kind of where was your mind at of like who's the next to go?
It would have been John for me. Like, I know that, you see, I tried to speak to John. Like, I tried to speak to Barry. I tried to speak to John as much as I could. And I remember that day, like right before we went to the challenge, what occurred was that I pulled John aside and I said, is there a no guys alliance? Flat out. Let's just talk about it. 2 women were voted off. It's 4 guys. And you're like, these guys literally went, the four of you, the 3 of you or the 4 of you went, the 3 of you, right? Barry, John, and Justin went off to the woods and like spent 30 minutes out. And like, I could not understand, like, why, what were they doing?
A long time.
It was such a long time. And so to me, it was like, okay, there's an all guys alliance. What's going on? And I literally called him out and I said, is there an all guys alliance? He says no. And I go, well, what are, like, I want to talk to you and we haven't had a chance to speak and I've been trying to catch you. And it was just a rush conversation and I didn't really get anything from it. We were still like 2 minutes. We had to go to the challenge. So Justin was already saying, Justin and John had like something going on in which, you know, Justin thought he had an idol. I guess he couldn't have had an idol. I mean, you know, John was in the woods a lot of times, you know, so he could have. So that's the scene there. I think for me, it would have been John, and it would have been John because I would have wanted to work with you, Barry. I felt like John at that moment. My mindset is John's a good player. He knows what he's doing. He's talking to everyone. He's talking strategy to everyone. He's not talking to me. I want Barry. I want John out.
I think for me, it was hard because I felt like it was probably going to be either Sarah or John, just because I heard rumblings of like scared of Justin and Sarah, but it seemed like people were more interested in working with Justin. I'll also say really quick, Justin did a really good job of planting all this little bits of information. I have no idea if it's true or not, but saying stuff like he would say stuff like, Emily and Sarah are really close, so if they link up, it's going to be a dangerous situation, which I have no idea if it's true or not. He somehow said like, oh, Chris is like a huge fan of the show, super dangerous. Like, he just had all these random little tidbits of information, and I have no idea if a lot of them were true or not, or if he was just like planting seeds of doubt to me with random things. But so yeah, with Sarah, like Sarah was starting to sketch me out a little bit in terms of the way that she came back and told us all about exile. I think it was going to be hard to announce that anyway, but it was the way she said it was like, oh, well, I was with, like, if you end up on a swap with Logan, it might be good, and here's why. And I wasn't going to say anything, but this is why I'm saying it now, where instead of being like, hey guys, I have some information for us, like the approach of it was. So
I guess, I don't know if that's come out on one of the interviews. Like, what was the story about exile? Like, did she reveal anything about the idol or was it more? Yeah.
Well, when she first came back, she just told us about the clue. And then once Liz and Jackie left, we were hanging out at camp. And then she came up to us and said like, hey guys, here's kind of the real story of what happened. They put down an idol between us and told us who to take it. And then we were I was a little frustrated. I was like, why didn't you go for it more? Like, we could have had a tool to work with. And then, and Justin was really frustrated afterwards. So I didn't know. So my guess is it would have been Sarah or John, but I felt good about, but John was, and the thing with John too, though, is he was just really loud at camp. And there was that second day when we were like kind of brain fried and we're all just hanging out. And John I have no idea what he was talking about, to be honest with you. But he was like running through these like crazy scenarios, and then we're just like no one can keep up. And I'm like, I'm not following this at all. But it was loud enough that Pink, who was in the field, could probably hear us. And it was just like, and again, I felt really good with all 6, but it was like, you're just looking for those little differentiations for like, who can I work with going forward? And I felt like at that time, I felt like Steph and Alby were my like whatever we decide is going to be good. And I felt I would have still been nervous because we all were on pretty good terms, but until Pink lost that last night of ball challenge.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Afterwards, yeah. It wasn't immediately after.
It was late. Yeah.
Okay. So, cool. So before we ramble some more, swap. We're at the swap. We're already an hour into the interview and we're only at swap.
Okay.
Yikes. Okay, so you swap separately. So for this next portion, you two have completely separate games. So we've heard a little bit about what happened on New Pink. I'm gonna start with that for that first round since you did lose. But I want to hear it from your perspective because I mean, still in my head, I'm like, that was one of the worst moves of the game. Why did you give green majority?
Awesome. Yeah, that's the big question. Yes, I've heard that come up a few times. So I think what folks don't know, what you already know is that the reason of how the vote switched to John, right? And in my mind, I wanted to vote Rob. Like I said, okay, let's vote Rob. Let's vote Rob. Let's vote Rob. What people don't know is, what they didn't know in the game was that Katie, I know, like, Katie was that swing vote, right? So Katie already had, in my mind, Katie already had it in her head that she wanted to work with green because Alan was in green, right? And at that time, Katie and we said, let's go truce, let's work together for this, let's work together, let's get each other through merge. As she's like, hey, about Alan, we're good. I'll take you to the final 3 with us, and the final 4, I'll throw challenge. Like, girl, you ain't throwing nothing for your husband. Like, I am not gonna be the third wheel. So we already said that we wanted to work with each other for at least for that time. But so what happened was that when that conversation took place, I can see Katie's gears changing. I don't care what it is. I am voting John. One of the reasons that I knew that she wanted to do that was because it was going to give Green the majority, and that was going to be good for her game. In my mind, I said, well, Katie is the swing vote, right? So we do need her vote. If she is adamant, she was so adamant, and she told me, she's like, I'm voting John, right? John. At that time, I said, okay, how does this work for me? Well, it worked for my game because it meant that I was willing to work with green. So therefore I can, if anything happens, I was in a good position because at that time, Ciara had already pegged Katie to be a good player. She already said, she's such a great player. She's such a good player. Do you see that? Like, I remember her telling me this, and I said, okay, perfect. They see how good of a player she is. They're not going to let her get that much further into the game because she just came from Pink, and they recognize her. They know she played at Survivor Challenge, and she was speaking a lot about what happened in Pink. And I remember, I think it was John who basically called her out and said, oh, so you made that happen. Like, you flushed those 2 idols. So this was campfire talk. So Katie's game was out there, and I knew that she was a bigger target than I was. So in my head, I said, well, there's probably like 2 or 3 votes before the merge. Therefore, who is going? Like, who's on? Am I on that chopping? I didn't feel that I was in danger, but I did feel like it would provide, instead of giving Green the upper hand of them saying, oh, well, we're willing to vote off one of our own to work with you. It was me saying, well, I'm open because I already voted out one of our own. And I just didn't feel like I had that good connection with John because he was working with Justin or Barry. I don't know what he was doing. So immediately, like, I just felt that I don't really trust him like that. And I rather keep my game open than, because I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So that's the reason why I felt like it was good for my game at that time, that it was okay for me to do that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So ultimately you vote out John, but then the next round, Barry, your tribe goes to tribal. But before we get there, you're the first person we've gotten to talk to from this tribe. So what was the vibe like that first night, going back to New Green? What were your initial ideas for how this tribe was going to go?
It was pretty chill at first. That challenge was brutal. That challenge, I had done really well on 3 challenges prior to that. There was like a couple word scramble ones and then the ball one with Sarah that we won. So I was a little nervous being like, shit, are they going to identify me as like being good? And then I struggled so hard with that challenge, and it made me in a safe spot after that, which was fortunate, but I was not faking any of that. I was dying the entire time and getting death glares from everyone on the other side the entire time. But thankfully, Alan saved me, and then we generously voted him out next. But he went to exile, and that night was really chill. We were just kind of chatting a bit, and I think, my mind was it was going to be clearly blue versus green to see who could get the pinks to side with them. Because the pinks that survived, I felt like were in the best spot in the game at that point, because it was very much like blue and green were only separated by one person. So they were going to, no one's going to target pink. It's very much a tribe versus tribe situation. So sure enough, they kind of become the coveted people, so to speak. But Damien and Emily, Emily was very quiet. And then Damien was he was chatty, but it wasn't game oriented at all. And so I felt like I bonded pretty quick with both Waylon and Angela. They're just good energy, fun people. And then, so I felt like we were talking pretty well. And then out of the corner, we were walking to somewhere, and then Justin comes over and he does his Justin thing and is talking strategy with them right off the bat. And I was like, perfect, I'll let him do this, and I'll be the friend on the side bonding with them. And then sure enough, the next morning we woke up and camp life was chill. It was nice. I talked more with Emily and Damien, and actually before they went to tribal, I saw Steph at the bathroom, and she was talking about the vote, and she said it's probably going to be Rob. And I was like, why don't we? I was like, you said Rob, and then she said oh well, John. They overheard John talking or something, so this is kind of a rough spot. And I was like, why don't you sacrifice John? Because then Pink is gonna, to definitely side with us. If green is up 2 over blue, then they're going to be much more inclined to side with us during the swap. And if you're in a good spot, then stay there. So that's ultimately what happened. And then they sided with us, because if it was going to be even numbers at that tribal,
it was.
Or had they voted out Rob and then we went to tribal next, it would have been, I think, 6-6 in the game with green and blue. And I think pink still would have gone with us, but I felt like it forced them a little more or incentivized them a little more. I
agree with
sorry, John, but that helped out, I think, I said, sorry, John, but I think that helped us ultimately in my spot, because I was nervous at that swap. I was very scared about just a swap in general. And honestly, blue got a really good break in that the tribes were divided, because we essentially had majority, because we knew, I was pretty sure pink was going to side with us, and we essentially had majority or tie in both tribes, and especially on my tribe. So Alan came back from exile. And then you talk with him for 5 minutes, and he's the nicest, most charming guy. We were talking, and there was a little bit of scramble mode, and Justin was talking with them and said he was trying to tell them that we were going to band together and vote pink. And I'm like, they're not going to believe that. I'm not even going to try to sell this to them. And so then Alan came up to me, and I was like, look, I felt really bad. I lied to him at that moment. And I was like, look, I would love to work with you, but I I feel like it's green versus blue. And he's like, oh, we're doing pink, right? And I knew he was lying to me at that point. And then, but fortunately, I had a feeling the target was on Justin. And then we went to tribal and split the votes and took out Alan. And then after that, I felt like we had like Angela and Waylon firmly with us at that point.
Yeah.
Now, I have a hypothetical, and then I have one other question about the Alan vote. So had Alan not been exiled, you said it was like a competition of like greens and blues trying to get the pink, but Emily and Damien both very quiet. They didn't really put up much of a fight in terms of getting pink on their side. Had Alan been there that first night, do you feel like it would have been a completely different story? Because Alan was very charming.
I don't know. I don't think so, honestly, because I think, like, when I talked with Pink, I think they were pretty dead set on going against green. That's what I talked with them. I mean, if Alan was there, who knows? He very well may have been able to take the target off himself.
Played the Katie card too.
Yeah, I don't even know how that would have factored in with like my thinking at that point. But yeah, I mean, he was in a tough spot. Yeah, I mean, well, there you go, Angela. Confirms it. But yeah, we were scared of it. Like, Alan was probably the one green I was most scared of, because just seeing him in challenges, he's not a big guy. He was dominating everything, and he was so nice afterwards and would say hi to everyone.
He was in our radar when we were in blue. He was. We knew that he was good in competition, so I think that, like, we knew that he was good. It was definitely he was in the radar,
So I think it was going to be, yeah, exactly. I think everyone fell in love with Alan when they talked with him. It's like, yeah. So, I mean, going to exile definitely did not help his game, and especially because we assumed, oh, he might have an idol, and he just seems like that guy of like, if anyone's going to find an idol, of course it's going to be Alan. So, so yeah, I don't know either way. I mean, if you talk with Waylon and Angela, I'm sure they can offer more input as Angela just offered down there, but.
No, when Alan did get voted out, why did you choose Alan over Damien? Because you split the votes between the two of them. But from an outsider perspective, I was like, oh, Alan already went to Exile Island. He can't go again, so why not vote out someone who can't go to Exile Island? Or, sorry, why not vote out Damien, who still can go to Exile Island if they were to lose again? So what went into choosing Alan?
Alan just seemed like more of a gamer. Damien was like, he was just chill and easy energy, but he's like, oh yeah, like, he doesn't watch the show. It's like much less threatening keeping him around. Emily was quiet. Was she exiled at that point, or was she there?
So no, okay. I think she was exiled.
Yeah. So I mean, and we had spent the night with Damien, and like I had a pretty good rapport with him. We both woke up early, and I drank his pine needle tea, and we just chatted for a long time. And yeah, I mean, it just more time to bond with him. But I think even if like Alan scared me, I think if I was on the same tribe as Alan from the start, like I would have loved working with him. But when you're coming from opposite sides and he's like the scariest one in those challenges and everything, it was like, I don't think there was any question for me that Alan was like the one who I would have wanted gone then. It's like, if he stays longer, he's going to get his like he's going to get embedded in this, and it's going to be hard to get rid of him.
Okay. Now, Steph, the next challenge you lose, not you specifically, but like your tribe loses, and this is when Katie is voted out. Now, how? Because Sarah was exiled. Sarah was exiled. How did you manage to get the target? Yeah, how did you manage to get the target on Katie, not on you? Because I heard from Caitlin and CR it was supposed to be a split vote between the two of you. So how did you get it on Katie without spilling her secret? Because you never told her secret.
Well, actually, I almost did tell her secret. There was one time right in like the fourth round, I just happened to see Alex go into the bathroom, so I head over there, and because during the game we were eyeing each other and like, are you okay? Like, are you thumbs up, thumbs down, how we're doing? And he went to the restroom and I just go ahead and follow him. And little did I know that he was really in the bathroom. And I was like, And I literally said to him, you know, Katie is there from Survivor Challenge, as you know. And he's like, yes, I know. And I said, her husband is here too. But I said this in Spanish. I said, el esposo de ella está aquí. And he's like, huh? I was like, he can't hear me? What in the world? So then I was kind of like waiting for him to finish. And I thought to myself, I was like, maybe I shouldn't say anything. You know, let me just backtrack that. Because what was going on during that time, it was that I kept seeing Katie come back. I was like, oh my gosh, are they not going to vote her out? No, this is my same experience with her the last time I played. So I knew Katie was a fighter, like, from that day. So I actually did say it, but he didn't hear me, and then I didn't repeat it because I was like, okay, that's a mistake. Don't say it. What occurred during that vote, Katie? What happened was that this whole commotion happens, which we've already heard about. In that Sarah trying to get Sarah Justin's attention, and I knew what Justin was saying. I think he was saying Damien. Like, I heard it. I mean, I knew what he was saying. But I didn't want to be connected with Sarah that much, because Sarah, as we went further in the game, she started getting more antsy. And and that happens because you're getting further in the game and things kind of start heating up. And I remember her going to me and saying, like, turning to me at that moment that she has to choose in front of everyone. And she goes, and she looks at me, she's like, what should I do? And I was like, what are you asking me for? I don't know. So I immediately had to basically, like, I was trying to pull myself away from Sarah a little bit. So what occurred was that, yes, when we went back, when we went ahead and we went back, when Sarah went to exile and we went back to camp, there was this standstill and everyone goes, well, I guess we have to talk. So Green goes, the four of them, Chris, Caitlin, Ciara, and Rob, they go off together and they speak. Katie and I are like, what the fuck are we going to do? So she's literally, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Sarah, she had to throw the challenge. Yeah. And then for a split second, she just switches. She's like, what are we going to do? We have to fight. And I was like, girl, what are we going to do? Like, what's, this is, so we start talking, and I heard like Katie's version. She said, that I said Ciara's name. In my head, like, I didn't say Ciara's name. I don't recall saying her name, especially because during that time, Ciara and I was already priming Ciara and saying, like, we had a conversation about Katie, about how Katie was a good player. And I did want to work with Ciara. So it may be a moment that Katie also knew that Ciara was a good player. Her and I had discussed how she's really good at puzzles. I said, you peep her. She's good at puzzles. She's good at this. So I think it was just like I guess it's a known. It's like, Ciara is really good. Okay, her name came up. I don't know who said it. It is what it is. But what I would say is that Katie goes and says, okay, I'm going to speak to Rob. And so Rob and Chris come. Katie stays with them, talking to them about what I understand. My perception is that she's going to talk to them about or actually they were with me. All four of us were together. And yes, we were all four together, Chris, Rob, and Katie and I, and she's telling them about the plan, and they're just nodding their heads. I can tell they're not even buying it. So I walk away, and I believe that they stay, and I leave her there, and I go to the girls, to Ciara and Caitlin, and Ciara looks at me and she goes, so what's she saying? And I go, well, she wants to vote you. Because at that moment, I already know that Rob and Chris are not buying that. What I've witnessed there in that tribe, and props to them, Ciara, Caitlin, and Chris and Rob were very, very tight. They had that they were on lock. They were in sync. And right at that, like, I remember being with them and seeing them, and they were just, without saying a word, they were, talking about exile and the idol, just by glancing at each other. And they're literally looking at each other and blinking and this, and I can see words like just magically appearing because they're connecting. I'm like, what in the Star Trek universe is this? And that was all that, doing that. So I knew they were in sync and they were tight. So at that moment I say that, and she goes, well, I guess, we're having a conversation. And all of the sudden comes this little this little guy just crunching down, because in our camp you have to bend down to get out of the camp. And here comes Chris with his bags packed and goes, "We gotta go to tribal right now. We have to vote Katie. Her husband's Alan. We gotta go right now." And literally, like, I didn't have to say Katie and Alan are together because Katie had done it. So the reason why I told Ciara that Katie was voting for her, well, that she wanted to vote for her, was one, because I know how good of a player Katie is. Katie at that time, she was going to use Rob. She was going to use Chris. Chris was at exile with Alan. I know this. She wanted to work with Green. She had more connections to Green than I did. But I felt like if I give Ciara, if I'm honest with her and I tell her this information before someone else tells her, Rob or Chris, that she will see me as like, I'm also a part of Green because I just voted out John and I'm working with you all. So it was definitely in my best interest to do so at that time. And I was like, and I was still nervous because I said, Katie is going to like vote my ass out again. She's going to grab me by my edges and she's literally going to vote me out this game because she's that good of a player. Still thought that at that tribal council.
I went in not knowing at all who was going to get voted out between the two. I assumed it would be one of the two of you. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, at that point I was like, no matter which one of them it is, I'm going to be upset. Because I liked both of you. But yeah, I was completely clueless as to what was going to happen at that tribal. So then we get to the double tribal. Steph, you get exiled. Who were you exiled with, and how was that experience for you?
I was exiled with Angela, and I thought it was such a pleasant. I didn't go looking for an idol. I honestly just sat there with Angela, and we had an amazing conversation. We spilled all the tea. We were just literally, it was like therapeutic to be out there with Angela. And I got to know her, we spoke about Katie and that connection. And she gave me a lot of feedback in regards to, the dynamic of her tribe. And I kind of felt that Katie was definitely, to me, in my head at that time, I felt like, I felt that Katie was, she was making moves there without, like, she was doing the exact same thing that I had seen her do in the previous game that I played, because she's a dynamic player. And I felt that, oh wow, like, got it. Like, Katie, like, maybe might have saved Angela at one point, and Angela was, good with her, and she's good with Waylon, and she's making connections with the people on Blue, so she really wants to work with Blue. That's the experience. That's like the feedback that I received. And I told her in regards to the dynamics of Green a little bit, and how, like, I was just trying to, because I wanted her to take the information back. So the plan was that if we were to merge, because it was coming, it was brewing, that I was, just let them know, like, I'm still with them, but I am, working with Green for now, as long as I can. And, we'll go ahead and we'll see. So that was the communication there. And I don't know, I just felt very connected to Angela, actually. And I just felt that from that moment, I was literally going to be loyal to her, and I would have taken her as far in the game, even to the three, like to the final three, if I had to choose. Like, I would have taken her into the game, but probably not over Alby and Justin. But yeah, that's how I felt.
Okay. Now, Barry, I have an inkling of what happened at that last vote before merge, but from your perspective, why was it Emily over Damien?
There were a couple things. I mean, she was quiet, but you could tell she was very smart, which kind of freaked us out a little bit. Justin had mentioned she had the relationship with Sarah, and he also mentioned that she made some comment about not wanting to see like a fellow Green member go, which like earlier in the night before the tribal that John went home. So I mean, ultimately it was just a numbers game. It was like Green had 5 at the merge at that point, and if she stayed, they would have had 6, and then we would have only had 5. I was tempted to take out Justin. I'm not gonna lie. Alby pulled me aside. And he's like, "You can't entertain this at all," and I like knew I couldn't. But when Justin was exiled, the camp was so just like, it was so chill and easygoing. And then Emily and Damien they came up and they're like, this is pretty good. The 6 here seems pretty good. And I mean, yeah, but it didn't seem, I mean, yeah, obviously from a gameplay standpoint, we had to take out one of them. And then and at that point, I felt really, really good with my positioning because at the merge, I felt like I was in, I mean, of course, it's all your own vantage point, but I felt like I was in, I don't know about the best position, but one of the best positions in the game because I had, right when Steph came back, she was like, I'm with Blue all the way. I got you. You're my number one. I said, you're my number one. So I was like, I didn't know Steph was saying that to other people too, but I felt good with her. Angela and I were super close. Waylon and I were jiving really well. And he wasn't, from my vantage point, I felt like I had more rapport with him than Alby did at that point, which very much changed over that day. But the reason behind that is when he won that last immunity, or the individual immunity going into our tribal, he got to pick the person for exile. He looked at me and said, who? And then I said, Steph. And then he picked Steph. So I was like, all right, well, if he's looking to me, then that he's good with me. And then Justin, I felt good. I still didn't fully, there was always that little inkling of we never talked final 3 or anything, but he was in my ear so much that I felt good. Me and Alby had been super on the same page the whole time, had been good. And I think we both, I felt really good with him. So it was in a good, and we had the numbers going into the merge too. I felt like if we had Steph with us, so I felt like we were in a really, really good spot right in that moment.
Okay, so you both made it to the merge, and before the medevac, this is a big thing that people have been talking about, is where Steph actually stood at the merge prior to Caitlin leaving the game. So, Steph,
so
finally, tell us what you were thinking.
So I was thinking I'm in hot water and I do not want to be in this position because I felt like I was a swing vote. I think, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think we had Blue. Yeah, I felt like I was definitely in a position that I was in a swing vote position, and I had to make a decision. During that time, I felt that it would have been best if Caitlin would have been there. If Caitlin would have been there, I felt that I would have had a discussion with Ciara and Caitlin in regards to what we were going to do. The challenge was that I really didn't have that opportunity because the things that were going on in the tribe were about our attention was on Caitlin, but in my head, I said, if I can just speak to them and we can devise a plan, maybe it could be a plan that I can vote with them. I was thinking about voting with Green. If I can vote with them, especially with Caitlin and Ciara, because I felt like Caitlin was a good, she thought about the game differently, and I really admire her for that. And I loved playing with Ciara, and I knew that she was I wanted to keep her there in the game, and I wanted to keep her with me as long as possible because she was a shield for me. But I felt that if I would have consulted with Caitlin and Ciara, and I probably would have gone with the Green on that first vote. And I would have tried my best to steer the vote away from Alby and definitely Alby or Justin as well. So that's probably what I would have done. But then it actually worked out because, we didn't want to see her go, but I think that it worked. When Caitlin did leave, it was like, oh, okay, I was like, oh, okay, definitely I can work with Blue now, and it doesn't have to be complicated, and I don't have to, jump around, because my journey would have been very differently if I would have done that. But I think that there were still the reason why I would have went with Green, it was because I was still I would have went with Green because I felt like we would have shifted the game, and they were not afraid to vote their own. We had talked about it. I felt very confident. They wanted to vote Rob. I knew that. But what I also knew is that I couldn't stay with them for too long because they were a tight unit. And there was the only person that I think I could have gone ahead was just of Rob, but I knew that Chris was in there deep with them. Caitlin and Ciara were very, very tight. So I knew that Damien, they didn't have a lot of trust in him. So to me, that's probably what I would have geared towards. But I was such in a good position with Blue that could have also been an option. So I didn't have that conversation with Caitlin and Ciara. I couldn't. We didn't have the opportunity. But if the conversation would have went well, I probably would have gone with them. But it turns out that I didn't have to make that decision, and I did go with Blue for sure, based on the numbers.
Yeah. So after Caitlin left, obviously that eliminated even that.
Yeah, it did, but it made it complicated, right? Because Caitlin leaves, so now Green is thinking Steph is with us. We still have the numbers. That's it, and I still have to play this role, right? And I have to tell you, like, I know this, I haven't spoken to Justin about this, but that must have been so aggravating to Justin, because he's the type of person, like, if he's with you, he wants to talk to you and he wants to, get confirmation, words of affirmation. He wants to know that you're with him. And I couldn't talk to him. I had to tell Justin, because Ciara and Justin they were eyeing each other. I mean, they were just after each other. And I thought to myself, why can't we just vote out Damien? I don't know. I remember at that time, I just really wanted to vote out Damien. And I thought, maybe I can try to make this happen somehow. But no, it was just, they were fixated. And it felt like, Ciara, to me at the time in the game, I felt like she was Daenerys, right? And she had the dragons and Chris was there, and Kate, and to me, I loved her gameplay. And I really felt like they were so in sync that, if I could just get them to steer away from, but they wouldn't. So what I would say, it made it very challenging for me because I had to play that side. For example, I had to sit with Green when we were in the reward, the food chat, not the food challenge. It was the rewards or auction. In the auction, when we were eating, I sat with Green. When we were I slept by Green. I did everything I could to be near Green and make sure that I was seen as kind of like I was with Green, because I didn't want any inclination that I was not going to work with them. But then I was also trying to tip my Blue and tell them I'm with you. And it really took a lot of effort for me to consciously do that. So yeah, it was very challenging for me. I would say, I just didn't want to be in the middle, but I had to still play that role, until I didn't have to anymore. And yeah.
Okay. Now that leads us to one of my favorite moments of the weekend, which is super random, but Barry during the flat puzzle challenge, just in general, Barry during the flat puzzle challenge. I mean, none of your pieces were the same height, and it's so funny to watch.
It was.
That was I was frazzled, so I didn't realize that you needed to jam them in, and then that was spatial relation puzzles. Not my strong suit. I've learned between that one and then that other one that Waylon and I think Angela and I did, and the one that no one could solve. That was rough though. Brandon was savage. Oh yeah. There was a lot of production shit talk, I was just like, I can't. Yeah, that was rough. Alby was ahead of, because we had the one-on-one thing, and Alby was ahead of me on the balance beam. And I low-key wish he would have won that instead of me, or beat me in that, because then I wouldn't have had that moment, but that is what it is.
It was honestly funny. The morning of day 4, and my notes say Barry during touchy subjects, hilarious, because you were the only one to get them wrong.
I did times. I did not finish last in that. I finished middle of the pack, but the couple that I missed. So one of the questions I missed was Damien. Oh, it was who would do best on The Real Survivor, and everyone picked Damien, and I was thinking about the show and the social strategy and all that stuff. In addition to the outdoors, obviously Damien's the best outdoors person, but not the strongest in terms of understanding the intricacies of the social game with the show. But then everyone picked him, and then I was on the outs, and I had a couple moments there where everyone was like, "Oh, look what Barry's doing now."
Now, morning of day 4, when merge happened, I was like, someone from Blue's going to win the game. That was my prediction. As soon as we hit merge, my guess was Alby or Steph, but Barry, you were my winner pick from the beginning of the game. So when you got blindsided unanimously, I was like, what the fuck did Barry do to get unanimously blindsided at final 8? So why don't, from your perspective, walk me through what happened to your game at that point?
Yeah, so it kind of starts back to the night before, but Caitlin leaving like really put a damper on everyone's mood. And I didn't talk with her that much, but I just felt so bad because, like, especially after I saw her in that challenge where she was holding her thing up and lasted forever and wouldn't, like, you could tell she really wanted to be there. So there was that. And then I had I had really good talks with Ciara and Chris that night, just about like life stuff and family stuff, but it wasn't like, I don't know, it just put me in like a really weird funk, and I wasn't quite myself that night, and I wasn't really like bonding socially that much with other people. I was bonding with them, I guess, but it wasn't the same. And that was also where I noticed that like Alby and Waylon were like 2 peas in a pod after that. And that's when I noticed the change. And then I also noticed too that like Angela and Alby, I felt like we're getting pretty tight too. And I felt the next day, then we had the vote at 10, and it was like, I felt, it was pretty straightforward from my vantage point. And then once we got to touchy subjects, it definitely pointed out to me, I was like, I don't think, like in terms of thinking about endgame, I was like, if I go further with Blue, I don't think I'm going to beat Steph or Alby. I felt like I had a shot versus Justin, especially after touchy subjects. I know I'm not the best speaker in that type of arena, so even with that, I'm not entirely sure how I would have done against Justin. But I think, so I was trying to think, I was like, Alby, I felt like was kind of in, I just felt like Alby was in, like if I got to the end with Alby, we had played, I felt like similar games in that we were both social and had gotten along with people and this and that. But between the last 24 hours, he had kind of made himself into like a bigger presence, and his personality was coming out more. And I felt like people were noticing that. And especially as the questions came in, it was like, all right, he's going to be more credited with stuff. And honestly too, like even just like you're looking for differences with people at the end, and Alby, even just that idol play where he brought us in, that was a brilliant play. I did not have anything like that I could tip my hat on. I mean, I had a couple more subliminal things, but I don't know if they actually really impacted the game that much in terms of telling Waylon to pick Steph and then telling Steph to like, why don't you guys vote out Rob? Like, I had no idea if that actually affected it or not. So it was kind of, I was like, all right, I feel like if I take out Alby here, then it could potentially blow up the game, and it would leave Chris in the game, who's a clear massive threat because Green is still there. And I felt like it would elevate me in terms of kind of getting respect from jurors at the end, but I didn't think it would put me up as like the main target right away. And my plan going into it was I wanted to do like a 4-2-2 or a 4-3-1 split, where I wanted to bring in Steph, Justin, and Angela. And I talked with Steph first, and she was like, yeah, I'm in. I figured if she wasn't in, she would like tell me, but then she was like, yeah, I'm totally in. And then Justin, it was pretty much the same thing. And I mentioned, I was like, hey, why don't we go? I don't remember if it was you or Justin, but I said, like, let's bring in Angela, but not Waylon, because Waylon also scared me, because Waylon was also just like big personality. Everyone really liked him. Everyone really liked Angela too, but it wasn't the same presence that scared me that Waylon did. And I had a really good talk with Angela too, I think at Final 9, where she said, like, let's go to the end together. And so I was like, all right, well, I have someone who wants to go really far with me there. She wanted me, her, and Damien. And so I thought, why don't if we can vote Alby, and then Chris and Damien, I was like, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're probably going to vote for each other. And then the other two, we tell Alby and Waylon that we're going to split it. So it would be a 4-2-2. And I thought I had Steph in my pocket more than Alby, which was clearly not the case. And then with Justin, I felt like this was naive on my part, but I thought he would be more willing to take a backseat because he took a little bit of a backseat at Final 9. He wasn't like, he wasn't super gung-ho on either. I was the one who was more adamant about Rob than Chris because I had no relationship with Rob, and I had talked with Chris and felt like there was, I guess, a window there potentially if I needed it. But then, and I thought after touchy subjects, Justin would be like, okay, I want willing to take a little bit more of a backseat, chill out, take the target off me. And I thought it would be an opportunity for him to be like, here's the bad guy right here, instead of it being him. And then, yeah, it clearly did not work. But then, yeah, the only time when I got nervous was, I knew there was risk going into it, but everyone was so like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Here's why it makes sense for me too. I feel good. Let's go. And then, and then at Tribal, when that question was asked about the confident thing, I was like, oh, I know I shouldn't say this, but like I do. And I feel like I should say this just to instill confidence with the people I'm with. And then that first vote came up and it was my vote for Alby. And I was like, oh, this is not how it's going to go, I think. And sure enough, varies to follow.
I have to say, so let me preface by saying before that night, as Barry was mentioning, I remember that night. Okay, so I was going through stuff in the game. I would say day 2, I had some women business going on, and I constantly had to go to the bathroom, and Barry said, I'll go with you. And I remember that night, Barry, like, I'll go with you, meaning I'll walk with you. He walked with me to the bathroom. We had a great conversation. Mm-hmm. In that conversation, Barry scared me. I'll tell you why you scared me, Barry. You told me, you said, I said, okay, so what are we doing? Are we good? I said, yes, I'm good with blue. I'm just here with green and trying to, play the role. And Barry goes to me, we're talking game, and he's talking to me about future plans. And you say to me, you're a good player. Everyone likes you. I don't think you're in danger. You're very good socially. Like, you tell me of how good I am socially and how good of a player or a position I was in the game that freaked me out. I said, this is a problem because Barry thinks this of me, and he's already thinking about the future, and he's thinking about people. Like, you were talking to me about people and who's really good and who's kind of not playing the game a little bit. Like, you were dumping things on me, and that was perfectly fine. But it scared me because I said, oh, sugars, like, I am very, like, I do talk to people. I am, making people laugh or whatnot. So immediately I literally went back to camp and I said, yes, I will work with you. Like, yes, I'm glad that you're talking to me. That was great. We had a great conversation. You and I's conversation was definitely one of the longest that I've had. I would say in the game, other than Angela being in exile. So I felt really good about our conversation. I just knew you were not going to take me far into the game at all, because you said that you were good socially and, you were hesitant about that. So I knew that. Mm-hmm. So then I remember going back to the camp, and I literally was quiet as a mouse because I was like, oh, I'm too social. So then the next day we're getting ready to go to Tribal, it was right when you were discussing, right before we went into the vote in which you got voted out. You come to me first and you say, do you want to make a big move right now? And I'm like, oh, yeah, like, let's go. Like, what are you thinking? You know what I mean? And then you whisper to me and you go, I think we could do Alby. And I was like, oh, really? But in my head, I was like, oh, no, screaming in my head, because I felt like this is, in my head, I was like, oh, it's too soon. And then I said, yeah, like, what do you think? He's like, and you said, yeah, I'll tell you more about it. Give me a second. And you left. And you were like, let's make this big move together. So in my head, I was like, oh, Barry and I are doing this big move. This is just in my head. And then I remember Justin immediately, like a few minutes later, he comes to me and says, so Barry wants to do Alby. What do you think about doing Alby? And he's telling me about Alby, and I said, well, wait a minute, if we do, so I explained to Justin, I'm like, wait, but Justin, if we do Alby, we kind of lose numbers. I mean, whose plan is this? Are we really going to break up? You know, and I remember that I felt at that time, I see Barry literally thinking you went from a position in the game in my head at that time where you were taking kind of a step back in the beginning, and then it like you were just gaining more and more and more confidence, and you were coming up with, you wanted to make big moves. You read people's games that night, and you told me, and I felt like you are such a freaking bomb ass player. And this thing that you're doing to Alby, you're probably gonna do it to me, because I know you just called me out and said I'm good socially. So I said, so Justin and I spoke, and I said, what do you think about doing Barry? And then I went to Alby, or I think I went to Waylon, actually. I said to Justin, I said, I'll speak to Waylon. And I spoke to Waylon, and Waylon told me, oh, did you hear about this plan? And I said, well, I was like, but who's telling you this? He said, Barry. And I was like, oh, so it's his move. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, do you want to make a move? Like, so, and that's how that came about. But honestly, because you're a good player, you really had a really good read in the game that night. You said that you were not feeling well. On the contrary, I thought you had a really good pulse and whatever, especially on me. Like, I thought I was going under the radar, and you were the only one that I know that like singled me out. And I was like,
I think
he sees me.
Everyone saw
and I got scared.
So I wanted to go deep with you. My plan was take out Alby at 8, and then probably do Chris Whalen 7-6, and then probably take you out at 5. I don't know if that would have. I don't know if this plan would have worked, because I think Angela was very scared of you. And sorry, Alby. But then, yeah, I mean, and I will say, Alby went on to win, so I felt somewhat justified by that. And I happily voted for him because he 100% deserved it. But sure. I felt like if I was going to, I needed to get credit for something in the game, and I felt like I wasn't getting any credit based on the answers to that. And I know I'm not allowed, like, I'm not a big personality compared to a lot of people there. And then I figured 2 people were going to be making a move at 7 rather than so I felt like even with that, so if we did make a move, I still wasn't going to just be like, oh, Barry's going along with it. The thing is, that's hard, is all the moves that were made in the beginning part of the game, like all the votes, they benefited all of the people that we were with, I felt like. And because everything in the game had been so tribe versus tribe focused. And so it was like, there was no breaking of that. But then my thought was, I didn't feel like I was going to get credit for those moves, if that makes sense. Whereas I could see Justin getting credit for it, or Alby being viewed out as more in the forefront. Right. And then you, especially because you're like tied in with Green and had good relationships with them. So that's another thing. And I mean, if you were in the end, I would have voted for you. So like that, you know, it was a little scary, but I think I definitely underestimated.
So I think you pegged me right away. And that's why I'm telling you, like, I just felt like you read right through me. That's so crazy. I don't want this person in the game, but I wouldn't have taken you out that early if you wouldn't have said Alby's name, for sure.
So I thought, so my vantage point, because in the beginning of the game, I know you came up to me and you were nervous about like an all guys alliance going on, and like women being left out. So me saying that was like trying to reaffirm, kind of like, oh, you're in it. Like, no, I feel like you're in a good spot. I feel like I'm in a good spot.
Right.
We can go far together. But then I can, of course, people interpret things different ways, and that's how that's kind of the magic of the game in terms of, you know, how it goes going forward. But
sorry.
It's all good. I will say, I think I really, really wish Caitlin didn't get medevac, because I think that it would have made, the game a lot more interesting. Because like, I know Sierra asked in one of the questions, she said, do you wish that you had, or do you regret not making a move sooner? Which, given the circumstances, I don't, because I felt like of the green. So I didn't know you were going to side with green potentially, but my thought was, if you had sided with blue, we would have targeted like Damien might have been the merge vote just because he wouldn't have had an idol or anything was our thought. And then after that, we probably would have taken out one of Rob, Chris, or Sierra. But I think like I hate pagongings in seasons where tribes just vote tribal lines the whole way down. I think it's so damn boring. And that's kind of the route we were going. And I think
Brandon and I also hate that.
You guys did that on your season.
That was a joke.
We love a pagonging.
Yeah. But I know a lot of times it's like the cleaner, better gameplay. But I was like, man, if Caitlyn had stayed, I think that there would have been. I mean, shit. If Steph had flipped on blue, whether it was me going home or someone else, like it would have been. I think it would have been pretty wild from there. Whereas, like, and once we got to 10 as well, it was like the 3 green. So I like Damien, I felt like if he didn't get voted out early, he was going to go the distance or go pretty deep. Because I think people, just based on Survivor gameplay, he was going to go deep. And people recognized he was someone that they felt they could have a good shot against at the end. But then Green had like the 3 biggest challenge beasts, which made it scary because you had Sierra, who's really good at puzzles, Rob, who like lasted forever with this. He won 2 or 3 individual other challenges. Chris won an individual challenge and just seemed did really well on the team challenges. So leaving any of them in was a lot more dangerous to me. Whereas if we had if we had Caitlyn there, for example, not that she was bad at challenges by any means, but she didn't come off as threatening. And we talked a little bit at the merge and just got like a good vibe with her. And I think, and especially knowing now that she's like a strategist, I think she would have
very dangerous. If you would have spent time with her, you would have pegged her too, for sure.
I think she would have scrambled a little harder though, because that last day the votes went by so quick. But I mean, like the vote at 9 was so quick and so straightforward. It was just yep, we're splitting. And then with Rob and Chris, it was just like it's going to be one of you two. When I talked with them one-on-one, I was like, sorry guys, I'm not going to feed you I'm not going to feed you BS. It'd be bad for my game to flip at this point. And I didn't want to use them at the vote at 8 either, because I figured they were kind of looking for I figured they would be looking for any sort of bone at that point to cling on to, because Green was just getting chop, chop, chop. And I figured if I told them that, they would flip it back, because that's what I would do if I was in their position. If I'm on the bottom and someone's saying, hey, let's make a move against this person, I'd go right to that person and tell them and try to blow it up and see if I could get a fracture. So
for sure,
in hindsight, I probably should have done that. But again, is what it is.
So Barry, you get voted out, as we know, and then Steph, the round after, you get voted out, but not after your amazing performance in the challenge where you were hopping up and down on 1 foot.
Oh, that was fun.
That was so great. Now, did you have any idea you were leaving? Did you have any idea that Waylon and Angela were going to flip on blue?
So I didn't. I had no idea. It was a total blindside. In fact, I didn't. I had no idea what was occurring. As Barry mentioned, he voted for Alby. Alby saw a vote for him. He's like, what? At that time, right afterwards, he immediately went from okay, what's going on? I'm receiving the votes. He was on high alert, trying to make sure that his name wasn't out there. And in my position at that time, I actually felt really good where I was, right? Because at that time, I wasn't really doing well in challenges. Even that challenge that we had, yes, I was really struggling, trying to get it. And I really wanted to. I was trying to, Damien, you just won one. Don't win one so you can stay in the game. They're going to want to vote you out next. Give me this one at least, boy. But no, he was straight as a statue. He was good. I tried my best. But what I would say is that I didn't have any inclination that the vote was going to be on me. I felt that I was in a good position. In fact, I think what was going on in the game, in my perception, was that a lot of folks were just voting for that vote. I felt that they were not looking ahead in the game. They weren't thinking about the end game, right? Because I felt that, okay, well, I kept asking them, well, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do after that? I remember speaking with Justin, speaking with Alby, And Justin and Alby and I were just like, okay, it's us three, it's us three, it's us three. Let's just go off and make sure that everything is good, and this is what we're gonna do. Like and I remember with Alby, like we tried to have those conversations, but Waylon comes in and he has a conversation about who the vote is gonna be, if it's gonna be on Chris, but someone may have an idol, or let's split these votes, and they'll vote for Alby, and Alby goes, why would they vote for me? Why my name has to be on there? So he's getting paranoid about the vote. And I speak to Angela, and Angela, this whole time, Angela and I are the only two women left, right? So I think it's final 7. And there's 2 women left. We've been 2 women left ever since final 9, I think. So during that time, her and I have always been touching base. Angela, we're good. If you hear my name, hear your name. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, there is an idol out here. I know there's an idol out here because I recalled from the Facebook chat that somewhere that someone was going to receive some type of advantage of some kind if for the viewer, the fan favorite. And no one's asking about this. No one's trying to say, like, where is it? So I'm thinking I just have to make sure that I'm not the sole vote. So again, I'm thinking about the future, and I'm thinking about this advantage that someone possibly has. And I'm trying to keep Alby calm because Alby hears his name. So in that, I'm noticing that Alby's trying to speak to everyone. He's doing that. Justin is trying to make sure that the vote is on him. He's kind of staying low, so he's taking a step back. And then I go to Chris and Damien, and I speak to Damien, and Damien goes, let's do Justin. And I was like, yeah, it might be that time to do Justin. It might be that time. Meanwhile, this whole time, I only want to do Damien, but Damien is safe. Because at that moment, Damien is the only person that I had no idea about. Like, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know where his head was. We didn't have that connection. And I didn't know that it was an idol. I just knew that there was an advantage out there for a fan favorite because it was advertised, I believe, right? Like, it was advertised. Yeah. And I just wanted to make sure that if whatever it was, I just wasn't that one single vote. So I go there I go to Chris and Damien, and that's what they're telling me. So I'm thinking Damien is really gun hold on voting Justin. And I speak to Angela, and which it's weird because Angela and I had touched base right away, and then this time she didn't touch base with me right away. Like, it was as almost I had to grab her. But that was okay because I felt like I am good, because in this situation, if you are a green and pink and you want to band together, what I'm thinking in my head was that they would take out either Justin or Alby. Naturally, because Alby's name is out there. Justin, Damien is telling me Justin. Chris they want to do Justin. And at that time, I felt like Chris and I had more, at least I felt that at least him and I were in that swap tribe together. So maybe he would talk to me a little bit more and take my word more than he would take anyone else's, because he hasn't spent time with them other than Damien. And Damien wants to do Justin, right? So that's where my head was at. And I had no inclination. And I literally remember walking to tribal, turning my head back and just making sure that Alby was good. And I kind of saw like Angela and Waylon and someone else talking or something like that, just very briefly, but I didn't think anything of it. So I was definitely blindsided on that vote. And I remember that when I was asked a question at Tribal Council, it was about the challenge of, how I was really trying to, Cam asked me, he's like, you really tried to do it out there. If you were the vote, do you feel like you did enough? Something like that. And I just felt like, yeah, like I gave it my all. I really, really tried. So if I am the vote, I guess I am the vote, because I really gave it my all out there. And I made this reference about like, a marathon and how, like my game, and that was great. But it turns out that I was the vote. I was totally blindsided because I felt that in that position, I honestly felt that I don't know why I was the vote, right? Like for me, I felt like if I was in a position, and I know Angela spoke to this, that she was the one, Waylon or her was the one that went ahead and said my name to vote me. But I would say that I just didn't understand why. Like, it would have never clicked to me that I would be the vote there. I knew that I was going to be targeted for sure. no way I was going in the game without being targeted, but not so early. Because at that time, I thought to myself, I'm taking Justin and Alby with me to the end, or I'm taking Waylon and Angela, or I can take Angela and whoever else. Like I would have taken Angela to the end. I didn't feel threatened by Angela's game at that point. Like I just kind of felt like I could go with her. Her and I were touching base. So that wasn't, I felt like I'd had options both ways. And I felt that I made sure to, show her that words of affirmation and tell her so that, hey, we're good. I got you. Like, let's, move forward. So I felt that I don't know why I was the vote. I don't know why Chris, like I wanted to really work with Chris during the game, but I just felt like him and I really didn't connect. And I was, I think one person that I really wanted to connect with, I would say like right at swap, was actually Chris, because I heard how great he was and so much about him, but him and I never got to talk or none of that. And I really thought that I thought that Chris and I could have possibly worked together, but it seemed like he worked with Angela and Waylon, and like it was just weird. So I don't know why I was the vote at that moment. I figured that they might want to take me out at 5 or at 4. I think it would have been best. Just my perception of the game. I don't know why I went out so early. I think I should have gone out.
I think you said it earlier, Steph, when you were talking about like how you weren't threatened by Angela's game and you were willing to go to the final 3 with them or go to the final 3 with Blue. The confidence that you have in your ability to win at the final 3 is probably also the confidence that they had in your ability to win at the final 3. And I think I said it at Tribal Council, the final 7 is where the best player or the most likely to win at that point normally gets voted out. And other people had a lot of good stories. I mean, the Pink Tribe members are going to have a great story.
For sure.
Alby and Justin are going to have a great story. And, Chris probably has a good story as well. But of them all, I like just watch this back, Stephanie, and try to see the personality that comes through. And I think that's the part that might, scare people at the end. And at final 7, you're the vote there, Steph.
Yeah,
you're threatening.
I was gonna bring it home. I was gonna bring it back to Florida. I was gonna put it like in a little, in a little pina colada, and I was gonna. That's it. Like whatever it is that. No, but seriously, I think that it was a good blindside. I just it was a good blindside. Like there's no regrets for my game at that point. I think I did the best I could for my charity, and I always kept that in the back of my head. So
cool.
I'll say quick, like when I got to jury, definitely the sentiment was like Chris and Steph is who people were rooting for at that point in the game. So yeah, it was, and then of course the votes come up and it's like Chris versus Steph, and everyone's like, oh, so.
So Barry, you already answered this. So we'll go to Steph real quick, because we're already at 2 hours. So Barry, you were both on the jury. Barry, you already mentioned why you voted for Alby to win in the end. So Steph, I mean, based on your jury question, it was pretty obvious you were voting for Alby to win. But what was your overall reason why you voted for Alby over the other 2?
I mean, it was tough, you all. It was tough for me because I really felt like I did see Justin's game and I saw that metamorphosis of him in the game. Like I did. I voted for Alby because he was what I felt like my ride or die. He was the person that at that time and during the course of the game, like we just grew to look at each other. We checked all those boxes. He was the person to tell me, hey, it's okay. Like, you're good. You got this. I was that person for him. And I did see his game. And I thought it was just brilliant of how much of himself he put out there. Even when he was in danger, he could have gone out so many times during the game. And he just was so resilient in the game. And I felt that in the final tribal council, like he did. To me, he did answer the questions with a lot of thoughts, and he did a great job at the final tribal council. I think that if Justin would have answered the questions, also with especially I know Barry just mentioned in regards, or someone mentioned not that Barry, someone mentioned in regards to like, why are folks like, why is everyone in jury that the jury's the bad guys, all that stuff. I felt like that was going to really, hurt him in the final tribal council. But I was very emotional as you can, Brandon, you guys know, like I was in tears, you all. I was so emotional. Barry was there. I was like, I don't know what to do. Yes, I wanted to vote for Alby, but I just felt so emotional because I was really riding with these guys and I wanted to see the three of us in the end. I did not mind that I was not the one that was sitting there. For me, it was like, why can't I have them both win? Like they did so well. Like I really, really, I felt very emotional about that. So yeah.
Okay. I'll say quick. It was not a super easy vote by any means. Like Justin, I was leaning Alby based on, I just felt like he was in a better spot most of the game than Justin. And then when his back was against the wall, he cranked out 3 immunities. And then he was great at Final Tribal. Like all of his questions, I felt like he was very much himself. Like I tried to ruffle their feathers just a little bit to like spice it up. And like every question that Alby answered, he owned, but like gave a very straightforward, but also humble response. Like when he mentioned how like when Justin, for example, he mentioned how like I put everyone there, yada, yada, yada. And Alby was like, yeah, I had luck in this game, but I took the deck of cards I was given or something to that extent and did the best I could. But it was like a level of humbleness that I just really, really appreciated. But I would have been happy with either of them. Like if it had been a surprise final 2 and it ended up being Justin and Damien in the end, like I would have 100% voted Justin. And I love Damien, but like as like a Survivor fan who values kind of the strategy and the social component, I think more than anything else versus just liking someone, like both of them, I think both of them would have been strong winners, but I felt Alby just played a better game overall.
Okay. So we're going to get into our rapid fire questions. Remember that these do not need an explanation. You only need to say the answer.
I'm to give explanations.
So we'll do Steph, you'll answer first for all of them. Barry, you'll answer second for all of them. Who's your closest ally throughout the entirety of the game?
Alby.
I'd say Steph.
Who's the person you wish you either met in the game, who you didn't meet, or could have worked with more?
Alejandro, yo quería trabajar contigo. No explanation needed. That's Alex for sure.
She picked me, and I feel the same way, Caitlin.
Okay. Your favorite challenge for the weekend?
Oh, it was definitely the one where we had to like pull. I tried so hard. Yeah, the pulling the metal thing.
I mean, it was awful, but I'd probably say the holding the thing one, even though it was a struggle, it was just, that's the one I'll definitely, when I'm 80 years old, I'll remember that one first.
Okay. Let's see. What's your favorite behind the scenes moment? So not challenge, not tribal council, just something that happened that we might not have seen on the camera or anything like that.
The pee tissue in the fire. No explanation needed.
Oh, I remember that.
I mean, camp life in general, Angela and I bonded super hard. And there was one moment when we were talking about just how the outhouse was like pretty nice and clean in the beginning. And then as the time went on, it just got real stinky and hot in there. And then we were just laughing, thinking about like Angela sitting in this outhouse while it's like roasting and smelly. And I don't know. We were just dying laughing, thinking about it. But I love Angela. We were really tight. So I'll go with that one.
Okay. Would you play again?
Yes, I would play again. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd play again. I'd be very nervous playing with anyone on this cast again, but I love everyone. But yeah, I'd play again though, for sure. It was really fun.
I feel the same way. Leaving the game, I was like, ooh, there's a few people in this cast. Like, I would be afraid if I was in the same cast as you.
I feel the same way. I agree with you guys. There's some people here, like, I'm so, like, I do not want to play with you guys.
I feel like anybody who went deep, it would be scary going, like if I ever played with Steph, Alby, or Justin again, like, it would be it'd be a scary prospect for all of us, I think. So, yeah.
Okay. So, real quick, anyone that's listening, if anyone gets 2 hours into this, why should someone apply for next year? What advice would you have to people playing next year?
I mean, the advice that I would have for anyone that's going to play is make sure that you have like your pregame plan and you're well fed and you're comfortable and you get a good night's sleep. But most importantly, I would say go out there and just be your authentic self. Always be mindful of those around you, and you're playing for a good cause, and always keep that in mind. Because when I was thinking about going to the game and I was like trying to figure out what I was going to do in the game, I wanted to come in the game and I wanted to basically like hide or burn people's socks. I even told Brandon that was going to be what I was going to do. I was going to collect socks, I was going to burn them, and I was going to cause chaos in the game. But then I remembered that I played for Stump Out Bullying and to raise awareness of cyberbullying, and I just didn't do that.
In the game.
So I was just saying, that was what got me from the game. Yeah.
All right, and Barry.
I mean, I think if anybody's ever thought about being on the show or wanting to apply, your odds will be a lot better getting on this version. And it was so much fun. I mean, it really felt, I was very nervous going into it, and it really felt like, I mean, you're out there playing the game, and it was such a cool experience, and you guys ran it so flawlessly. And the best part about it was just you meet a lot of really, really cool people out there from just all sorts of different backgrounds. I felt like I learned so much about just life in Maine, being in Maine, and it's honestly an experience I'll never forget.
And I just want to give out a shout out to Jazzy, girl, you came through for me. But all of production and host, Alicia, Robbie, Brandon, Cameron. I mean, there were so many people there. I'm probably forgetting folks' names, but thank you so much. You guys did an excellent job. I really had such a great time. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. It was a great experience. I felt fulfilled. And if I were never to play a live reality game, I'm content.
I echo all those sentiments. Everyone made it such an awesome experience for us. And I'm really glad to see that it seemed like production had as much fun as we did, or had a ton of fun on their own in the backside of it. So huge thanks to you guys for helping us live this dream and experience.
Well, thank you guys for playing this first season and kind of going in with no preconceived notions at all, and just kind of like trusting that we could do this.
Yeah. Ride to the airport. I was like, I don't know this dude at all. And he's driving me through the woods at 2 a.m. Like, he could be a murderer, not even having this game going or anything. And I put in trust, but it paid off. So it worked out.
There you go. So Steph, you quickly already talked about Stomp Out Bullying. So Barry, you had an interesting story about your charity. So why don't you just quickly talk about that before we wrap up?
Yeah. So I was originally playing for Siva Sight Foundation. They go to usually developing countries and it's a great charity. They give like free cataract surgeries to people and essentially give them the gift of sight, and every $50 covers one of the surgeries, which is really cool. While I was in the game, though, I talked with Ciara, and she was talking about this really great charity that helps her son who has autism, and how they provide a lot of resources that just aren't really available in her area, and how it's made such a profound impact on her child's life, and how he's starting to speak when he wasn't before. And it was just really, really touching. And I, just knowing that she had such a personal story with it, and that it was directly making a big difference in her life, I wanted to switch my charity over to hers. So at the end of the game, I requested that, and you guys honored it, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, so I actually just sent, that was the one charity I had to mail a check to. So I just mailed the check for Unearthed Potential. So they ended up getting, I think it was $800 between you and Ciara. So it was awesome. So thank you guys again for both participating in this first season. Anyone listening, make sure you follow Live Reality Games on YouTube and Facebook. Make sure you follow Can You Survive on Facebook if you don't already. Applications will come out in November for our second season, which will take place in June of next year. The exact dates, the 22nd through the 26th. It'll be a 5-day game instead of 4. So really exciting. Thank you guys for being here and for talking to us for over 2 hours about your games. Yeah, I definitely didn't expect it. Cameron, thank you again for being here. And with that, we will sign off.
Thank you, Bashful Brandon.
Yes, this is Bashful Brandon signing off.
Good night, everyone.